Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm sorry, guys. I'm still getting over this crud. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Hannah, for bearing with me and being willing to reschedule from last month to do this today. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. I was very excited to jump on.
This is so exciting. And I was telling Hannah before we went live, if you didn't notice from the thumbnail, Hannah has horses. And I know that a lot of the people who watch this channel love horses. So, Hannah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your horses, and the kind of stories that you write?
All right, so we'll lead in with the horses. I have two horses. At this point, we had three. We lost one around this time last year.
Oh,
Unfortunately, he had cancer that he fought for a very long time. That unfortunately we had to let him go. So as I'm starting this, I'm like, not to start with a downer,
oh,
but I've still got I still have two. Um, the one I've had ever since I was like 17. He is like 26 now. He's super ancient, but we love him to death. We've done like I tell everybody, I'm like, he saw me through high school, he saw me through
oh,
college, he saw me through my wedding. Like he's like been there for like so long. And then his pseudo brother, they're not actually related, but they act like brothers. A horse that I got about 6 years ago. So I still have those two. At this point, they are in their 20s, which is older for horses. So they're both senior citizens. They're kind of semi-retired at this point. But for a number of years, I competed some with them. I rode, I trained prior to really getting into riding. That was what I did for a living. I taught and I trained from around the time I was 18 until I was 30.
wow.
And then unfortunately, I ended up getting a disability when I hit my 30s. And so that was not really a career path I could continue down on.
Hmm.
Though I did keep my horses because they are like my children.
Yeah,
And they got to kind of transition from having to, kind of be working horses, working 5 to 6 days a week for me to really just more of a leisure thing. Um,
hmm,
Pet companion animals that were really more for my enjoyment. So it kind of worked out nicely because, around the time I started dealing with my disability, my guys were getting older. So it was a good time to kind of let down on their workload. I can't physically do as much anymore. So it's kind of worked out nicely. And that's why I say they're semi retired. I don't think either one of them will ever be fully retired because they both are very much used to having things done with them and getting out and doing things. So I think for as long as they can kind of get out and I think even when you're a little older, it's good to kind of still feel like you got it a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
So I think so long as they can kind of get out there and feel like they got it a little bit, I think they'll still be doing little bits here and there. Um, and so what really got me into writing, my late 20s, my husband and I were married, and he was having to travel a lot. He's going to do a lot of overseas travel for work. Um, we had our farm at the time. We have a small, not very big, it's about 9 acres, perfect for what we wanted and, kind of what I wanted. It's got a barn, it's got a riding ring, we've got some pasture. So we were living on our farm at the time my husband was traveling. I had, time to myself while he was gone. Um, I'd written all through high school, kind of gave it up in college. And then when he was traveling, it was just kind of one of those things. I was like, I'll pick it back up again and try it.
yeah.
And over the course of, I think it was about a year and a half, that he was kind of traveling and he was gone, I ended up writing my debut, which is The Hunter. Um, and then kind of around that same time that I got sick and started dealing with my disability, I kind of started touring with the idea of, well, could I publish this?
Mm.
And I ended up hooking up with my local chapter of RWA, and those lovely ladies took me under their wing, taught me all I needed to know about publishing, in particular about indie publishing. And then I published my first book in 2020, and it was such a blessing because I am still able to work, even though I do have to deal with chronic illness and disability.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've been able to transition into that pretty seamlessly, which I feel very, very lucky to do. So at this point, I write full time. I publish full time. Like I
Wow.
said, I've still got the two. We call them the Bay Boys. Is what we call my two geldings. I've still got the Bay
Oh.
Boys. Um, they're like my kids. They're not going anywhere. I told my husband after I got really, really sick, I was like, I know it's going to be rough for a couple months, but gotta have my horses.
Oh
um
yeah.
so yeah, so that's kind of what led me to publishing, and that's kind of my full-time gig now, outside of my other full-time job that I tell everybody is actually being chronically ill, because that's actually a full-time
Oh.
job.
And you are so active. I connected with you through a Facebook writers group, and you are so positive and so hopeful, and that carries over into your books too. And I just admire you so much for what you are overcoming on a regular basis, and the positivity and the love and the light that you share through your books that you share to the world. Do you find that difficult to balance when you're writing and you're feeling
um
bad or?
at times, sometimes it just sucks. I'm not going to use the other word that I usually use. Sometimes it just sucks. Sometimes it just sucks, and it's miserable, and it's hard. But I kind of tell everybody, maybe this is personality for me. I have to hold on to hope that at some point it's going to be better, and I have to kind of hold on to those lighter moments, because I feel like if you don't, and I really struggled right around when I initially got very sick. I did struggle the first month or two, and I just kind of realized, if I've got to hold on to that hope, because if I don't, I'm going to end up being in a very dark place. And that's not
Mm,
a place that I want to be.
mhm.
And I do feel like that comes in through my writing. When I'm writing, I tell everybody, things in my books it's going to get bad. It's gonna get dark at times, because that's the world is like that. It's not always happy, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. But what I hope to offer to people is this idea that, sometimes it's going to get really, really bad, but if you can
Mm.
just hold on to that hope that there are still things in the world kind of worth living for and fighting for, that'll kind of get you through. And I always tell everybody, I do feel like you're either going to laugh or cry, and you might as well laugh, is kind of my life
Yeah,
motto. I know my doctors get a kick out of it sometimes, my immunologist in particular. I know this it just cracks him up sometimes, and I'm like, well, it's one of those two options.
that's
And I'm
right.
gonna go with laughing's the best medicine. So I'm gonna
Ah,
try and find the bright side of it if I can. But I won't, some days it's dark. Sometimes it's dark and I'm not feeling light and I'm not feeling happy. Usually my husband is the one who has to take the brunt of that, unfortunately, and he's a good sport about it. Um,
mm,
but but yeah, I try, and the only thing I can really say is I have to hope that there's something better.
yeah,
I
yeah.
have to hope that there's something better. I have to hope that somebody's going to find a cure for this, because what else do I have if I don't hope for that?
Hmm. Yes, and I think not on that level, but when I was reading Connor's journey in particular, and just seeing Connor's one of the two main characters in Hannah's, I think it's free, right? First in series novel
Yeah,
right now on
yeah, yeah.
Amazon. Yeah, free
It's
right
free.
now.
Yep.
So you could go down in the description box and grab a copy for free. But Connor holds so much pain with him, but he doesn't let that deter his values. to the point where even the person who's sort of responsible for some of that pain, he still finds, I'm not going to be spoilery, but still finds a way to look at it differently than people might expect. I guess is where
Yeah.
I'll leave it without getting spoilery there. Um, but I think that a lot of that shows the depth of character that you have as an author, pouring that into what a lot of us would be going through in his situation. It'd be so easy to fall into a deep, dark hole. And instead, he's just pushing and pushing and pushing. um,
Yeah, Connor was a tough character to write at times. Some of my characters I do feel like are tougher than others, and he was tough at times. It was very difficult actually with him. My editor and I went back and forth a lot, um, trying to find that softer edge of him because he is kind of a harsh character, and there was a lot of back and forth of me trying that. And initially he started out much harsher than he is in the book, but I'm very happy to the place that we came to where he
mhm.
still kind of has those sharp edges, but it's not all, kind of bitterness and regret and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other main character, I'd say Connor's almost like the secondary POV
Yeah.
main character out of the two. The other main character follows one of my personal favorite themes in a fantasy. She's a runaway royal, sort of running away from her. Well, not running away because she doesn't want to be a royal, but stuck running away as a royal. Um, that's really, really exciting. So, between the two of them, which one was easier for you to write?
I actually think Connor was easier to write. Rhiannon was hard because I needed her to come from this very privileged place, needed her to not be aware of the world and what was going on, but I needed her to be likable.
Right.
I needed the readers to really root for her. Um, and in a lot of ways, that was tough, kind of writing her journey of self discovery and trying to find this balance between this reality of where she's coming from, but also not making her so unlikable because she believes these things or she has these views was really, really tricky at times.
Mm, yes. There's a lot of really good classic themes that you bring into your book, but you do it so originally. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons. I mean, you've got 50 reviews on Amazon. Congratulations.
I just hit
Um,
that a couple days ago. I was so excited.
it's super, super exciting. And if you're watching it, you're a reader, you're like, wow, right? That's 50 reviews. If you're a reader and you owe some indie authors a review, it can make a huge difference. But yeah, you've got 50 reviews. And I think one of the reasons that the book is so unique is that it takes the classics, the enemies to lovers, the royals standing up against the big dark badness, and not quite a chosen one, and modernizing it. So, how did you go about that? Did you have to sit down and plan it out? Like, here's the one I want to do, and here's how I'm going to bring it modern. Did it just happen?
It just sort of happens to me. I make the joke often, like, I'm pretty sure I've made it with my editor. I've made it with my husband. Like, I'm always really bad. Like, I'm always sitting here and, like, I need to actually, like, write to trope. Some of these books, I always end up picking a trope and then I just kind of run off with it. And then I kind of look at it and I'm like, it's sort of to market, but sort of not to market. I don't know. It just sort of happens to me when I write. Um, Okay, so funny story. I think this is how my brain works. So I was taking British Lit in college, and
Fun.
my professor at the time, we had to write an essay about Hamlet. I can't remember what his parameters were of, like, was Hamlet like a bad person or a good person? And I remember I went up to him at the end of the class and I said, okay, I said, but what if I want to take like a different angle? Because I don't think Hamlet's either one of those things. I said, what if I want to argue that, Hamlet maybe had like some mental illness or something going on? And my professor looked at me and he kind of blinked and he was like, well, I tell you what, if you can argue your case to me and, make me a good paper, I'll give you an A.
Wow.
Me
No
so
pressure
I
or
was like, I
anything.
know, I was like, well, that's a challenge. So I went home and I worked on the paper. I did get an A on that paper. I think that's
Yay!
just kind of, I don't know if that's a good character trait or not, but I definitely think that's a character trait that I have. I just kind of like, I don't know, I just kind of like taking things sometimes and going, but what about this? You know, what if it was this thing? I remember I had another one about the hours. I had to write a paper on the hours, and I had to go to a different professor, and I was like, okay, well, my interpretation is that this is about death, not about the like three things that you listed out. And could I write my paper on that? And same kind of thing. He was like, well, I mean, I guess if that's your interpretation. I remember I got an A on that too, and he was like, this was kind of different. And I was like, that's what I got from it after after reading the book. So I think some of it's just my personality. I really don't do it intentionally. I really, really don't.
Wow.
Like the shifter romance that I'm working on right now, the series I'm working on right now with the wolf shifter, like marketing it is kind of tough because I'm like, it has the wolf shifter elements, but then it's kind of different. Like it's a wolf
Right.
shifter set in like epic fantasy, which is kind of different, and it sort of has like the fated mate soulmates thing, but then it's kind of different. So for
Yeah.
me, I think it just kind of happens, and I'm just trying to let myself run with it at this point. Like let's just go with it, and maybe that'll be what I make my brand on.
I
So long
love
as
it.
people will read it, I'm gonna keep writing it.
It's just taking the unique way you see those stories and those themes and putting your own spin on them. That's awesome. So, when you decided, I know you mentioned that you had researched a good deal about publishing, especially indie publishing. There's a lot that goes into indie publishing, and I think your first book came out in what, 2021?
2020 was when I
2020.
dropped the Hunter. Yep.
And I remember I was starting to research after you. So you must have been researching obviously before then, and I started researching in 2020. And there wasn't a lot of easy to discern good resources. There were tons and tons of Google resources, but most of them came with dollar signs or
Yeah.
too good to be true promises or things like that. What would you Sorry, my toddler just ran in here. What would you recommend to a new writer starting out today, as far as how to decide whether to
Oh.
go indie versus traditional, and what made you
Um,
swing the indie route?
so I got really lucky, and like I said, that I connected with my local chapter of RWA. We have a really good, um, I know RWA is not without its issues, 100%. We do have a very good local chapter full of some really, really great ladies. Um, and I really lucked out, I think, in falling in with them because that kind of gave me some people, both people who were, you know, traditionally published and indie published, to kind of help me sort through all of the stuff that was out there on the internet. And that I really feel like was one of the most helpful things to me, was kind of having people to talk to. Um, as far as, you know, if you don't have that, excuse me, I look at, to me, publishing is a long game because I do want to do it as a career. And so my recommendation, I feel like, to folks would be, look for the people who have been doing this for a while. Look for the, not the people who necessarily like, you know, got rich quick, you know, or, you know, made a big splash. If you're looking to do it for the long run, look for the people who have been publishing 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. Look at what they're doing and look at what resources they have out there, because they're the ones who have been able to stick with it for the long haul. Um, and you know, that I really think would be my biggest recommendation. You know, there are 9 million courses and you can pay for 9 million things, and you know, everybody, I feel like there's resources that's all over the internet and it can get confusing. Um, but I would look for the folks who've been doing it for a while and who have been doing it well. And they are not necessarily the folks who are going to be trying to sell you 50 million courses, you know, every couple of weeks. You know, not the like get rich quick kind of thing. But if you want to do it for the long haul, look for the people who have been on the long haul. Look at what they're doing and don't be afraid to experiment. I've experimented with a lot of things when I started. I brought a lot of that from my years of working with horses. because you have to experiment with horses, and I think you have to experiment with riding too. And if it doesn't work, then don't beat yourself up about it. Just X that off on the list if that didn't work and on to the next thing. Because so much of publishing is individualized. There's no one path that's going to be perfect for everybody. So you'll have to kind of find what works for you as an individual. And that's going to mean trying things and trying strategies and seeing what sticks and seeing what doesn't. Because I personally think publishing is a very dynamic industry. It's kind of always changing. So we have to be able to kind of roll with the changes. Um, for me, what made me decide indie versus trad, I'd already been working for myself for a number of years doing horses, so I was pretty comfortable with setting my own hours, being my own boss, that sort of thing, and then having the disability on top of that, I need a certain level of flexibility and a certain level of accommodations, that I felt like would be easier to provide if I was the one kind of calling the shots on things, versus someone else. And just for me, I was comfortable with kind of running my own business, and so that was what I ultimately decided what I wanted to run with. And that's another one of those things that I think it's a very personal decision for an author where you've kind of got to decide, which of those models is best suited for you. Do you feel like trad is best suited for you? Do you feel like indie is best suited for you? And don't feel like you have to rush it. Take some time and think about it. Being in my local chapter of RWA, I was able to talk to people who had been traditionally published. I was able to talk to people who had been indie published, so I could kind of get some feedback on both ends of the publishing spectrum, and other people's experiences. Um, I think that is one cool thing about our little group that we have people who do poetry, we have people who, are with bigger houses, smaller presses, people who are indie. So that I think was really beneficial. Um, but yeah, I'd say research it and sit on it and try and figure out what's going to work best for you. And that might not be what works best for somebody else, and that's okay, you know?
Absolutely. I love that. It's so much good advice. So for the writers who are watching or people who've thought about writing, definitely take note. And I totally agree with Hannah on having a community of authors who have been where you are is huge because no matter when you're watching this video, if you're watching it today or you're watching it 2 years from now, the industry may change, but the people who've been in it will know what has changed and what is sort of dying out and what is improving over that time. Luna asks, which of your books did you have the most fun writing? Yeah, you've got
Most
several
fun
good
writing.
books.
I do think that it has to be the series I'm working on right now. It has been very, very fun. The one with the wolf shifter. It's a trilogy. I love these characters. I got to introduce some really wild creatures into the world of Pern Cohen. The series takes place a couple hundred years before the events of the Hunter, and it's kind of Pern Cohen at its height. So before the invasion, before the spirits kind of start dying out and the giftings start dying out. So the magic is kind of at its height. So I got to include all kinds of fun magical elements. It has forbidden love. I am a sucker for the forbidden love trope. I love the forbidden love trope. So I get to do 3 books with the forbidden love trope, which has been so fun. And yeah, I think that's been the most fun. I love the characters, I love the creatures, I love the storyline, the world that I've gotten to create. I think so far that's been my most fun one.
That's great. Uh, you got, okay. So I have to step away 1 second because my
Okay.
husband locked himself out of the house. But while I'm gone, if you don't mind, Luna's asking about the horse shifters. And I had a question to that effect too that I guess you can answer while I'm gone, which is basically we have a lot of people ask about pets and whether or not they die in the books and if they need to have tissues or not. So I'm going to let you sort of speak to that and the pets that show up in the books, but I'm going to be right back.
Okay. I have not done horse shifters yet. There will be another book around the same time. It's at least going to be one book around the same time frame as the shifter books. It'll be in the Legends of Fern Cohen. And there might be a horse shifter in that. It's either going to be a horse shifter or a bear shifter. I haven't decided yet. But I haven't done one of those yet, but I might, because that could be really, really fun. Um, and as far as pets go, no animals will die in my books because I can't handle it. No, no animals and no pets will die. I can't. I just like my pets are like my kids. I just don't. That'd be a line too far, I think, for me for writing. I might put them in peril, but no one will die. And as far as pets go, really at this point, it's been mostly in the Rees of Blythe have wolves, basically, that, kind of like how we got dogs or how we're theorized to have gotten dogs. They tamed and they've taught them to be hunting partners. And they're kind of a revered animal. They live in the castle with them. They have a pack. I think one of the things I've enjoyed about the Legends of Fern Cohen, at the beginning of the Hunter, the Kalnorians have come in and the wolves have pretty much died out, save for the last two that Connor has. Whereas in the Legends of Fern Cohen, you're in the height of everything, and so they have a whole pack that lives in the castle and runs around the castle. And I've made jokes with writing friends about like must be an exciting place to live because you've just got this whole pack of wolves like running loose around the castle. Imagine how exciting that is for the visitors. So the Rees of Blythe have the wolves. And then I've touched on it a little bit, not a whole lot, but the Rees of Shoic have hawks because hawks are kind of their sacred animal, that they've used for hunting and for messenger birds. And that kind of came into play because there's a hawk shifter, not trying to be too spoily. There's a hawk shifter in that trilogy. Um, Cafel, they have horses. They're the horse, folks. You see that in the successor. The Ree has his own stable, and you've got one of the characters as the stable hand and that sort of thing. And that's pretty much it for pets. I haven't really dived a whole lot into the clan of Tith yet, although their animal is owls. I have a feeling they'll probably have some sort of pet owl. It's probably similar to the hawks, maybe more messenger, maybe hunting birds. I haven't decided 100%. Sure, probably more messenger birds with the owls. But yeah, I always work animals into my books. I can't help it. I have another series in a completely new fantasy world I just started working on, and I've already worked in like multiple animals. Like I'm just accepting that there's always going to be animals somewhere in some shape or form.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about stepping away. That like never happens in my interviews.
That is all right. My husband is babysitting my dog right now because if he doesn't, she would be in here and she would be on this live chat.
Yeah, my husband's just texting me. He's like, I locked out of the house. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna run. Come back.
Yeah.
Oh
Is
goodness.
it? I left mine with the dog. We have a very noisy black and tan coon hound, and I was like, you babysit the baby because otherwise she's gonna be in the middle of this call.
Yeah, note the door jammed. I did not lock him out. Just in case everybody's watching and thinking, oh, she writes dark fantasy. No, no, no. It's not like that. Oh, but no. So you have so many different small series going. They're sort of tied into the same or similar universe,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, yeah.
So how many books do you imagine coming out in sort of this universe? Are you planning on like all of your main books being in here? Or you have some spin-offs?
So I think for Pern Cohen and Kellner, I think the Taylor Cohen saved for a novella that I've got that people I've had some readers asking for. So people want more Brandon Maxon, and I think they want some more Connor as well. So I have a novella. It was really just pieces that I wrote when I was writing The Hunter that kind of cover what makes Connor the Hunter and the Kelnorian invasion. So I've been piecing that together this year. I think I've got about 45K, enough to turn it into a novella. So I'm gonna release that in the next year or two for everybody. That will probably be the last Tales of Fern Cohen book. The
Oh,
Legends of Fern Cohen, I will finish up this trilogy. At some point, I will go back. I don't think this is a super spoiler if anybody's read The Hunter. Um, Rondwyn of Blythe, the Ree that Connor talks about, that's as deserving as any man. I do want to do her book because I've been pulling from a lot of her lore in the Legends of Fern Cohen, and I just really want to write her story. I think um, it's going to be awesome. She's going to take on all three of the dark spirits, and it'll be cool at once at the same time, and it'll
yay!
it'll
How
be awesome. So
exciting!
I don't know how many books that will be. It will at least be one. I won't really know until I start writing it. And then the other thing that I'm working on in that world is Kelnor, actually. I've got 3 books that will take place in Kelnor that will be following Alekos's kids that will make up a nice little trilogy for the Tales of Kelnor. Um, that'll take place around the same time as the 2 books about Connor and Rhiannon's kids. And then I think that'll probably be it for Fern Cohen and Keldor. I think that's kind of where I'm gonna let that sit. And then I've kind of been playing with this. I've been writing in Fern Cohen and Keldor since like 2018, so I've been writing in that world for a while. So just to kind of give my brain a little bit of a break, I have another world that I have been writing that's going to kind of be in the same realm as the Pernicorn books, but it's going to be entirely different continents, so an entirely different land. And I'll actually do some tie-ins in the Tales of Kelnor, so everybody will get a little bit of a sneak peek about that people group. Um, excuse me, before I launch that full series. I think I've got about like 8 books planned out for that. So it's going to be big. It's going to be a long series.
Yay!
So I'm gonna finish Pern Cohen and Kelnor first and get those straight, and then we'll kind of I'll segue into the new series. Around I'm also working on some contemporary stuff as well for horses, just as a brain break for me and also something I've wanted to do. So
Well, yay! That's very exciting. A lot coming in the works. So, if you're an epic fantasy romance lover who wants to know that there's a lot of books, Hannah already has a lot of books. You can actually click the link in the description box and see all these different books that Luna mentioned earlier. But there's more coming. So, also give Hannah a follow. I dropped Hannah's links, her link tree in the description box too. So that way you don't miss what's coming soon. And Hannah, I think you said, do you have a newsletter?
I do. I do. Yep. I have a newsletter, and if you join the newsletter, you can get a free copy of the current prequel that I have to The Hunter, the Duchess. And that tells Faustina and Idris's story. I just always preface it with it's not going to be a perfect happy. If you've read The Hunter, you'll understand it's not going to be a perfectly happily ever after on that one, just because of how that works with the book.
But stay
So just
tuned.
be
But
prepared
stay
for
tuned.
that.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Hannah, for joining, jumping on, and putting up with the lockage out of the house and everything. But really, for sharing your journey and your personal experience writing and transitioning, and still with the horses, the bay boys. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I was very glad to be able to hop on tonight.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you're watching the replay, feel free to leave any questions that you have in the comments. I'll make sure that those get over to Hannah. Tomorrow, we have another live chat with a different indie author who also writes epic fantasy, and a live read from C.H. Smith, who just put out a debut, or not a debut. C.H. Smith has too many books to be a debut. His newest release novel tomorrow night. And Luna says, "Oh, thank you for joining us, Luna. It's good to have you on." Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening. Bye.